Hi, my name's Dominic with Obligatory. We are here with a 411 interview with Niko of the band Scarves. Niko, thank you for being here. How are you
Thanks for
doing?
having me.
Want to introduce yourself and, say what's up?
Yeah, things are going good. It's actually, I'm in Seattle and it's a surprisingly lovely day. It has been one of the darker winters into like springs that I remember. We were having rain up until like a week and a half ago or something horrible. So I'm filled with an unusual rage and energy for life due to the sun. So that's where I'm at today.
Hmm. Well, I guess we can get into it. I think, I don't know, just to go off of what you said, I think a mixture of rage and life, I think is kind of a good way to describe kind of, the attitude of your music. Speaking of,
Thank you.
your third single of your upcoming album was just released today, the day that we're recording this. Don't know when this will go up. I wanted to ask, was the album title predetermined before that song was written, or was it the other way around? And kind of what's the significance or, the reasoning behind that being the namesake of your upcoming record?
It wasn't decided before the song was written. I am a very restless tinker with everything, so I feel like there's almost nothing that's ever predetermined with our band. I feel like, I mean, a great example is the first song on our record that's coming out was the first song I wrote for it, and I finished the lyrics for it last. So everything just kind of like ebbs and flows with where it is in the process. The reason for that song's name was I just kind of get obsessed with sounds, and they like delicate creatures sort of had this like flow that once it got in my head, I was just became really obsessed with it. But then when I started thinking about the themes of the record, when it came to like naming the record, I really thought about kind of the core themes on the record are sort of like fragility against like the concrete existence of life, and sort of that like you're trying to do something, you're trying to exist and live in this world that seems to be very oppressive to basically all things made of meat. And nature itself is so sharp and jagged, and then society is so sharp and jagged, and there's sort of this resistance against it. Once again, that sort of joyful rage that you need to just exist. And it really felt like it captured it. And it sort of in my mind was like it's sort of I think this record in some ways like a twee response to Pink Floyd's Animals, where it's sort of that there's so many themes about like organic life kind of in opposition to like inorganic life, I guess, not to, like sort of those forces within it. So I felt that it really just encapsulated everything I wanted to say, and sort of had that naming convention I like, which is a little bit out there, but also cool. We then also found out it was the name of like a pretty big comic book series by like a somewhat, I don't remember who. But and ooh boy, was that a bad day for me, because we already sent it to press. And I was like, no, that was my thing. I came up with it, not this comic from the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I like the title. I like the album. I gave it a full listen today. It got, the little promo advance. Singles are great as well, obviously. Again, this will probably be out a little bit before the full album's out. So make sure you check out the singles. Then August 26th is the full album. And I'd say listening to the
There'll be
album.
one more.
What? Say that again.
There's gonna be one more before the record comes out too. So we're gonna get pretty much half the record out.
Yeah. So yeah, listening to that, I think it's at least the way I hear it, I think it comes alongside sort of a lighter tone than maybe not all of, but most of the music on your last album, which also I think has a really memorable and great title, Dinner Dates for the End of Days. But there's kind of this sort of similar themes in this sort of like search and like journey for optimism amid like dark and very difficult times. And obviously, the world is pretty different from 2018 when that record came out. Pandemic, probably the most obvious example. So, how have things changed for you personally in the 4 years since that record, and kind of how have they stayed the same?
It's funny, yeah. That record has this big apocalyptic thing. There's kind of a joke when we were writing this one, like how do you write an epilogue for the apocalypse, And that was sort of like the idea behind the record. It's interesting because in some ways things have gotten so much worse for the world even I thought they would. I mean, right now we don't need to go into it, but things are not great.
Yeah.
But for me, they've gotten a lot better in just a lot of different ways. You know, I moved to New York for a while, moved back. I had this sort of very big like transitional life journey. That's kind of led me to like comfortable work, comfortable place to live. Me and Nessa have been living together. I mean, like, you know, are together and have been together for 4 years now, and that's going great. So it's kind of funny because I think that optimism that I'm searching for kind of found me in a weird way where it's like there were some dark times. Like when we were living in New York, it was not easy. We had jobs we hated. Everything's really tough. And I think there's a lot of that reflected in this record. But we finished writing this record sort of on the tail end of it when we moved back to Washington and we're living with my mom during the pandemic. And I think you can sort of start to see the glimmer of hope really shine through in some of like the songs that were written later on the record. I think that like compared to the last record, I think I'm not dwelling on the darkness as though it was this force that could never be beaten and it's just inevitable. Like I think that record starts and closes with the same line as like when the big one hits, which is a big thing in Washington, the big earthquake is going to kill us all. And there's nothing like that on this record. I think the forces that are directly discussed aren't that intense because I just think I wasn't thinking about them so systemically. If that makes sense. I know there's like more directly political songs in this record, but to me, I think there's more joy in it too.
Yeah.
Just because life kind of got a little bit better for me, which feels like a little bit bad to say in these times because I know it's not for most people, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like this weird back and forth of like yeah, just trying to get better on your own, but then it's like when you finally do, you feel bad because it's like all these bad things are still happening and arguably getting worse. It's like, should I be getting better? But you know.
I had a friend who they kind of instilled in me that like it is somewhat of a responsibility of every human to try to enjoy their life as much as possible within the confines of what they're able to do, where it's like do what you like, obviously help, charity, everything, but also like do enjoy life because it's sort of one of the reasons for existing is to like enjoy this beautiful place, not necessarily from like a religious perspective, but just from like a human perspective of like if you're not enjoying it, then all those bad forces are inherently winning. I mean, it's like I guess it's like the Idols classic thing, joy is an act of resistance, which I know is like, you know, a statement some people have issues with, but I kind of think it's true. Where like if you're not at least trying to enjoy the people around you or the things that you're doing, like making the art that you're making, not finding joy in that, then in some ways I think you're kind of letting those forces really take everything. And I think the things they can't take away are that joy that you're like allowing yourself to have. And I think that that's something that like I try to like remember when I feel really bad about my position. Not that things are like perfect, but they're really a lot better than they were 4 years ago.
Yeah. It's funny you draw that parallel between the joy as an act of resistance because that I actually have a tattoo. Not to make this about a different band because we are here to talk about Scarves.
Love to talk about it.
But that definitely gave me kind of a different perspective on like, you know, why do I want to like let myself succumb to this misery when that's kind of what a lot of people kind of want. And you know, I did kind of see a similar attitude and a similar mindset in a lot of your music, and like we've kind of talked about, just finding some sort of joy amidst kind of the inevitable like anxiety and existentialism that will seep its way through, but you kind of gotta work your way around that.
Yeah, I mean that record is also like, I mean, it's funny because like I don't feel like that band influenced at all us at all in terms of like music because we were so far on like the wimpier side of they're just like pure like oh like it just feels like it feels like you're getting like punched by like the straight up just like muscle of the arm, not even like the fist when you hear that record. But I think that like I was thinking a lot about how they approach like masculinity and stuff with that record, where it's sort of like they're allowed to make this heavy music while also kind of shirking a lot of that like macho bravado that typically comes with a lot of it, especially from like male fronted bands like that.
Yeah.
So I was really inspired by that to like let the gentle side in, which is why I think there are so many images of cute little fluffy animals on that record. Someone once described our band as like a very cute kitten with very sharp claws. And I really like tried to, I think they like in some ways personally allowed me to feel that way when I was writing it. So I think there was a lot of that joy in there.
Yeah. So kind of going back to how you explained, and I didn't know that you lived in New York and came back to Seattle. And by the way, congrats. You said you and Nessa have been together for 4 years. Congrats on that.
Yeah, as of 2 weeks ago.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And then if I'm not wrong, this new album is the first release to feature Elijah on it. Did you meet him when you were
Yeah,
living in New York, or how did that partnership come to fruition?
yeah, that was wild. So I feel like I can't even like explain how cosmic this was in terms of like we moved to New York. Things in Seattle were really bad for me about 4 years ago. Just really not a great situation in terms of like where I was living. My job was a contract job that ended. I just wasn't like happy with Seattle. We had a really disastrous tour for dinner dates that left me pretty shaken
Mm,
up about like whether or not I wanted to make music. Me and Nessa were still like writing demos in my mom's like attic, but it wasn't really like feeling particularly good. Like it's always great to work with her, but like I just felt like I was sputtering out. And so she's from New York originally. She's from Hell's Kitchen. And
mm,
so we decided, like, you know what? Let's just full stop restart. Let's just move out there with her family for a while and just see what that big city has to offer us. Taylor Swift said it was waiting for me. She wasn't 100% right. But we go out there, and one of my childhood best friends is playing a show 3 weeks into us getting there. I mean, like somebody
mm.
I've known, Lizzie Costello is incredible. She's a band called Special Explosion. She writes music under Sister Fortune, I think, right now. That's really beautiful. And she was on tour. She invited me out to her show. We played, we didn't play, but like her opener, she was opening for a band that Eli was playing bass in for one show only as like a total just fill in. And I had been struggling to meet anybody in New York. It was only 3 weeks, but I was still like feeling really anxious. And I was like, I'm not going to do the Seattle thing where I don't talk to anybody. I'm going to just aggressively talk to somebody. And he was just this very tall beacon of light that I saw in the green room. So I went over to him like, hi, my name is Niko. I'm from Seattle. I'm new here. I play in bands. You play in bands. Please be my friend. And he was like, okay, sure, let's get coffee. And then he just like quickly became like pretty much my best friend. And then it was funny because it took me a while to be like, hey, I'm working on these demos and I don't really know what to do with them. So I like said it to him and he's like, hey, come to my basement and we'll just like fill them out. And then it was amazing how quick it went. It was seriously like we went from having these really rough, emo-y, like super American football inspired demos to basically the core of what this record is in like no time at all. And then it was like that kid is an absolute genius. Like he hears things that I don't think I would ever hear in music. And I love everything he hears. He's also in an incredible band called The Living Strange. I gotta plug him because they are, I think, one of the most underrated like East Coast bands right now.
Yeah, I found that in my research. The name sounds familiar, but I'll have to check them out after this. And anyone else listening, watching this, check it out. You got Scarves recommendation right from the source.
I'm contractually obligated to pitch that band in every interview. He made it very clear.
Yeah.
Not just because I like them, but also like we'll have a talk. No.
Yeah. That also, I'd prior to this interview, I was like kind of looking through your Twitter, and I saw you're very like active on there in like really just like showing love to other artists. I know I saw a lot of like retweets and mentions of Cheek Face, who I'm a big fan of, fellow Cheek
Old
from
school
here,
friends with those guys.
Barty Strange, Oceanator, a bunch more. How important is that sort of like, whether it be like a sense of community or just sort of showing support and showing love to other artists and, just really making sure, that's vocally expressed? Like, just how important is that to you, I guess?
I think it's the most almost like the most important thing about music for me is it's like it's funny because like everyone you mentioned are people I've known forever and like I've just loved forever. Bartiz is funny because we have been Twitter friends for like years now, and I don't think we've ever met in person, but we've been to each other's shows a bunch. It's just there's always been like I don't think I've ever met him, but we've been in the same room countless times. I've tweeted at each other millions of times. But to me, it's like I think that sense of community and really just like using your platform to showcase like what you love and believe in is really important to me. And I think it's like I think about like Craig Finn's whole idea of community and like the Hold Steady and how it's all about like creating a scene and really like bolstering together and sort of like it's so hard for small bands, not that some of those bands are particularly small anymore, but it's so hard to get above the noise with how difficult the algorithm is to beat, with how difficult it is to get press these days. And so I think just being able to like have people stand on your shoulders as much as possible and then kind of like do that flip is so incredible. And it's also just like I think it's so important to be a music fan if you're going to make music. I think it's so weird when you see bands that like at any level have like zero people they're following and like never talk about other people's music. I like hate that self-indulgence because I think that um like if you don't like music, why are you making music, or like other people's music? I feel like those influences and that inspiration are so critical. And just like also, like I'm a music fan before I'm a musician. I really like think I listen, like I listen to music constantly and I love it so much, just even as a concept. That like I think it's so weird when people forget that when they start performing and like start to like only care about what they're doing and the riffs they're writing and like never want to talk about what's happening in the world. And they get so there was one band I read an interview for, and he was talking about how he only listens to his own music these days. This is like a really big band because no one else is writing music that fresh or cool. And I don't think they were one of my favorite bands. I don't think I've listened to them since that interview. I was so frustrated. I was like, that's not it. Like, that's not the attitude.
Yeah, I mean, let people do what they like, but I like your answer a lot more. I think, for me, and not to go off too much about what Obligatory is doing, but we're all about community.
Hey,
And
feel free.
for me, like, there's really no, I don't want to say there's no point in music without community, but for me, the reason I'm so into it is, the more you listen to, the more you're really learning. You're learning new perspectives, you're learning new attitudes, and just intaking new information. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole point of it.
And I think that like when you go to shows where there's a great sense of community, they're so much better.
Yeah.
I mean, we've played with Cheek Face a bunch, and they're probably my favorite shows to play because those cheek freaks, they go hard about everything. Like if you tell a dumb joke, they're down. Like if you want to rock out, they're down. And I think just like building, like I think they've done such a great job of building like a real community that like has a clear identity, but also is so open and willing to just like get it when you go to shows. Like because we've played like countless shows with big bands, and like you can tell their fans are just like some random guy in an office who just like listens to them and doesn't really care about anything else. But the Cheek Freaks, they're down to clown, and like I'm a clown, so I'm into it.
So you mentioned the Hold Steady, and I had a question relating to them as well as some others, because I know you've mentioned in a previous interview that they were like one of your biggest influences. And then I know the Bandcamp description for Delicate Creatures, which I'll plug again, August 26th is when it comes out. It also mentions Built to Spill and Pavement. I'm wondering if you had to make like an indie rock Mount Rushmore, are those three names on it, or who are you choosing?
Oh, it's so tough because an indie rock, it's so weird because indie rock is so massive because like what is indie rock? Not to be like weird, because it's like for me, it's like my perfect indie rock Mount Rushmore is just like Joanna Newsom's had 4 times. Like I just feel like that's like as great as like in terms of like if I had to think of somebody who's perfectly doing something so uniquely their own while also like encapsulating the sound that they were in, but also breaking it. Like I feel like Joanna Newsom's always up there for me. Yeah, it's tough. A Mount Rushmore. I mean, I would say I feel like it's like Isaac Brock just because like he's so the like figurehead of that angular guitar into television inspired synth rock. And we're from like similar cities, so I feel like it'd be just, like the closest thing I could just put myself up there. I would say like him. I'd put Joanna Newsom. I want to put Kit from TV on the Radio up there just because like his music was so influential, like his guitar playing is so influential to me. And just like one of the nicest humans I've ever met and should be immortalized in stone. There's 4 heads on Mount Rushmore, right? I should put somebody else up there.
Yeah.
I don't want to put Ben Gibbard up there because I don't want people to remember that band exists and then realize we're just like a watered down version of Ben. Like so, just like as far away as I can put Ben Gibbard from people's memories possible. Who are indie bands? Like I feel like there's so many good ones, and I'm not trying to like stall for time. I'm genuinely like having a hard time like thinking about who's like, because it's like I love Doug Marsh, but like, do people know who Doug Marsh is? I got way too into like the literal idea of this, not like my own interpretation, but who do I think should be on this thing? I'm very influenced by Built to Spill. It's probably the easiest way to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think those are all great picks. And also, like you said, I mean, not even just with indie rock, I think so many genres have just become so like blended that, like I think typically Joanna Newsom, most people wouldn't think indie rock, but it's not that far off either. And it's just like, it fits, it's close enough and whatnot. I think it all becomes blended, and comes down to semantics and what's indie, what's not indie.
I feel like the yeahs, right? Like I feel like Karen O is so influential, like what we think of as indie rock, but like I feel like they got, because it's like there's this weird, sorry, not to get into this thing that everyone talks about, but there's this weird like area of like alt rock becoming indie, right?
Yeah.
Where like, because I feel like the White Stripes and like Karen O would be up there for sure if we're willing to allow them to be considered indie. Because it's like I feel like Fever to Tell was like that first like record, for so many people. But it's like they're so big now that like it's like the Arcade Fire. Like I'm going way too into this. I'm basically just listing off all the bands and Meet Me in the Bathroom. So
yeah, so this is, I have two other questions that I really wanted to get to. These are definitely a little more out there, and maybe not out there, but maybe not as straightforward as the others. I don't know. That last one might not have been super straightforward. But I found a tweet that you said, when I was growing up, I really thought guitar battles were going to be more of a thing than they are. So if you could have a guitar battle with any one person, or witness a guitar battle between any two, who would you pick for that? Sorry to make you keep picking things. I know there's so many.
Easy. No, this one's easy. I would love to guitar battle with Jack White. In that, I feel like he was so instrumental to me developing my style, but my style is now so different than his style. I really do feel like it would be like that climactic scene in like a samurai movie where like the master fights the apprentice, and I'm pretty sure the master would still absolutely chop me in half and I would slide down in slow motion. But I would love to see the steps getting there, because I feel like I don't meet a lot of people who play guitar as like percussive as I play it, where like, because live it's a lot more like I'm willing to like hit the strings and do weird stuff. And it's not like, it's a style that can be very bad if it's done wrong, but if anyone has seen Jack White live, you're like, oh, it can also be incredible live. And I would love to see him absolutely destroy me. The other one that I think would be fun would be Ed from Deerhoof. I think that would be I think I would just be having so much fun. Actually, I want to see Ed and Jack White having that and just see what happens. Because I feel like it doesn't matter who wins. We would just be blessed with the most chaotic music of all time.
Yeah.
I'd be into it.
So I'm gonna ask, choose some more slasher flicks. Track off Mall Goths about love for horror and slasher films. Do you have a top 5, top 3, or however many you want to name favorite horror movies?
My favorite movie of all time is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think that movie is so beautiful and so I'm gonna be honest and vulnerable. I cry when watching a lot of horror movie documentaries and like how people make them, and like the craft of finding out that Bubba, like, do you know the story about the actor who played Bubba?
I don't. At least if I do, I don't remember it.
He was a poet. That was the only person big enough. Like, I'm going to screw it up a little bit, but we're going to tell my version of it from memory. He was basically like a poet, and maybe I think like a poetry professor, who was like the only person big enough that auditioned for like what they envisioned him being. And to get him into it's sort of a debate whether or not this was intentional or just Tobe Hooper wasn't that great of a director when he first did this movie, because I think he was a student. But they had him in costume in the Texas heat, full of like actual slop, and I think that was like real pig guts and stuff over him. So he just smelled awful, and he's a very gentle and nice soul. But throughout the filming, people started to get more and more afraid of him because he smelled so bad and was so terrible that he started to actually get more into like the isolated loner mindset. And it kind of destroyed his psyche for a while. And then he like really, I think, gave just like one of the best, him and like all the final, like I can't remember the final girl, but she just gave like one of the best, most like organic performances I've ever seen. And it just felt like really a crew that didn't know what they were doing, making maybe like the best thing ever. And people who like I don't think would never normally get cast in movies, giving some of like my favorite performances ever. Like when he's like got the chainsaw at the end of the movie and spiraling out, I just like get so emotional about it. So like, this is so beautiful. And then also like finding out that he said that he wanted to be buried in an unmarked grave so nobody would visit Leatherface, because he was such a gentle, like peaceful poet, and he is buried in an unmarked grave, the actor who played Bubba, because he just didn't want to be associated with that violence. It's just like there's so much to that story that makes me happy. And then like I don't know, I love the American version of The Ring. I know it's like kind of controversial, but I think it's like such a beautiful movie. The first Scream is like, I've watched that movie a million times. We'll happily watch it a million more. Just like, I love a really artfully done. I mean, also, like, I think the latex scene from the first Nightmare on Elm Street is like that might be my favorite scene of any movie, when he's like coming through the wall.
Yeah.
So I guess those are my top 4 if I had to go. I just watched one called Evil Dead Trap from Japan that really blew me away. It's like an 80s horror movie that's sort of a mixture between like Silent Hill, The Ring, and Saw. It has like some scenes I'm not super down with, but then the rest of it's like really genuinely creative, and like no one knows about this movie. Like literally, I have a friend who was like one of the head horror movie writers for the AV Club, and even he was like, I've heard of it, but I haven't really heard of it, which was like the first time I've ever been like, I stumped him. I stumped Alex. I've never done that before. Like I didn't really stump him, but it felt like a win to me. So that is my very long-winded answer to say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The American Ring, The First Scream, and then Nightmare on Elm Street they're definitely my easily top 4. I'm sure there's a million movies I'm forgetting that I love, but those are my like, the scariest movie I've ever seen is Phantasm. I don't know why. That movie really hurt me emotionally. Can't explain why. I don't think it's that scary, but it really like filled me with a sense of dread that nothing else has.
So
I'm a top 3, sorry.
You'd say those 4 are your Mount Rushmore of horror movies?
I would say it would be definitely like Bubba, Leatherface. Samara is the American one. Sadako is the Japanese girl from The Ring. Freddy, and then Ghostface. That's what he's called, right? And,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. I mean,
Matthew Lillard. Little spoiler for everybody.
That's I think pretty much all the questions I had. Actually, I did have kind of another part when I asked about Elijah. So we're kind of going back a little bit, moving away from the lists, the choosing. With Elijah being in New York and you and Nessa being in Seattle, what's kind of like the dynamic when it comes to like recording and like making music together when you guys are on, kind of opposite ends of the country?
It's really cool actually, because like when we made this record with Brandon Eggleston, who's the producer for it, which is also surreal to work with because he like has worked on some of my all-time favorite records, and like I was a big Mountain Goats fan growing up, and like getting to work with the guy who like has been their tour manager forever and has produced Beat the Champ, which is my favorite record, was just so cool. Also just like the nicest guy. But like we flew him out for that. But then nowadays when we're like recording, because we are working on another record, me and Nessa will like sit down, write some riffs together, and then we'll send it off to Eli. And then we found this really cool application called Pedal, or like Pedal. It's Pedal. And what it does is it allows you to like, it's a free app, so shout out to that. But you're able to like screen share a DAW, like Pro Tools, while working both in it. So like I can record something on my computer and then like drop it through the computer to him. And then he can just like show me his workflow while we're producing together. He's really like the main guy who like does all the actual production stuff. So it's sort of like a really high-tech version of the Postal Service, like very instant messenger version of it, like the AIM AOL of what they were doing. But it's really cool because like you lose a lot of the human element that I really like, but the fact that it's even possible is so surreal to me. Like, and that it's also smooth. Like the last few sessions we had, I feel like we were making some of the coolest stuff we've ever made, and like it just felt so fluid in a way that like I think working in a box allows you to, versus like when you are rocking out with a band in like a practice room where you're able to like more holistically see what you're doing. And I think even the distance gives us more perspective because you're not so like, I don't know. I feel like it gives you like more of an engineer's perspective on everything that's really like unique. And I think it's helping us write some very like surreal music.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty much all I had. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything you wish I asked you?
I could just talk about horror movies forever. I feel like I was just so excited, like a little dog, like, jumping up, like, oh, I want to talk about, can we talk about Empty Man, which I just saw, like that. But it's like, I won't waste your time with that.
All right. Yeah. I mean, again, thank you so much for anyone watching. Delicate Creatures out August 26th.
Thanks for having me.
Via Good Eye Records. Check it out. Bandcamp, any streaming platforms, I assume. wherever you listen to music. I'm sure it's there, and I definitely recommend giving it a listen. Yeah, thank you again
Thank you
so
very
much,
much.
Niko, and take care.
Yeah, have a good one, friend. See ya.
Peace.